I asked my boss to join me for today's podcast. Unfortunately, my daughter was too busy with her budding TikTok career. Oh well, let's get to it. Welcome. Another fabulous episode of IBF On Demand. I'm your deeply committed, or maybe should be committed host, Eric Wilson. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thanks for the follows, the subscribes. Find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. You can actually find this podcast, IBF On Demand, there. Thank you, Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. So thank you very much, Arkiva. We actually have our online series coming back in September. We did this in April. We're going to do it again now in September. It's a full month demand planning, supply planning, S&OP online training course. 6 courses, 4 speakers, 1 month. You can attend them all or select which ones you want to watch. It's an awesome event. September, check it out at ibf.org. When you look at why S&OP IBP fails or why it stalls, look at the top 5 reasons why S&OP is struggling right now. Most research, including IBF research, usually see at the top of the list executive engagement. One survey, it was close to 20%, was the number one reason why S&OP was struggling. I mean, I fully agree. If you don't have it at the right level, if you're not at the right horizon, you're not at the right decisions being made, S&OP is going to struggle. Yes, absolutely, executive engagement is at the top of the list. But the better question is maybe, what exactly does that mean and how do you get it? That's why I have on today's guest. Denise is a result-driven supply chain executive with extensive leadership experience in biotech, pharmaceutical, and cell and gene therapy industries. She has extensive experience across all phases of supply chain, including sourcing, planning, distribution, and delivering and managing the entire product lifecycle from launch to sunset. Denise has successfully navigated complexities of early-stage startups of Fortune 100 market leaders, including Johnson & Johnson, Merck, and BMS. Listed as one of the top 50 women leaders of New Jersey and a recent speaker at the IBF S&OP Best Practices Conference in Chicago, please help me welcome Denise. So welcome, Denise. I'm excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here, Eric. Thanks for inviting me.
You gave a great presentation in Chicago. I enjoyed hearing you there, and I'm excited to bring you now to my audience and be able to kind of continue that conversation with them. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. I can't wait to dive right into this.
Yeah. Well, in your presentation that you gave, you talked a lot about executive sponsorship and things of that sort. And that's pretty much what the topic I want to kind of delve into today. So my first question, here's the easy one. Why do we actually need executive sponsorship for an S&OP process, IBP, or really anything that we're doing as far as process based inside of an organization?
Yeah, I absolutely love that question. I know your whole entire podcast, we talk about sales and operation planning as well, but I like to look at it this way. I take a step back, Eric, and people who know me know that I talk in metaphors and I talk in examples. But I look at it this way. I think about January 1st comes around and everybody makes New Year's resolutions or they have their annual goals and objectives. And when January comes around, how many of us have said, I want to lose weight. I want to get back in shape. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to train for a 5K. Exactly.
Oh, no.
Not that.
Not that one.
But we all get very excited. And January comes along and we are knocking our goals out. We are doing a great job. February comes around, not so much. March comes around, we're not doing it at all. And I take a step back, Eric, and I go, well, what happened? You were so excited in the beginning, but you petered off. What happened? Well, the sales and operation planning process is very similar. That we get all excited when we obtain executive sponsorship, but sometimes we lose our gusto, we lose the juice, and we lose the executive sponsor. But I'm here today to talk about why is it so important? And it doesn't need to be this way. You don't need to lose executive sponsorship, right? So from my experience, and I do a lot of reading too, and I look at the Gartner studies and I think, well, when you think about all the common challenges that can occur when accomplishing a very successful sales and operation planning process, gaining executive sponsorship and having executives participate in S&OP happens to be the number one biggest challenge of implementing S&OP. So why is that? And let's go back to your question. Why do I need it? What's the big hustle and bustle over having it? Well, I think we could sit down and probably have an entire 5-course dinner and we can talk about the importance of it. But today for the podcast, let's try to narrow it down to 3 things. Number 1, I say strategic alignment. It's extremely important to have executive sponsorship to provide visibility and support of your S&OP process at the highest level of the organization. And when that happens, S&OP then comes across as a strategic imperative or a strategic process that is linking the business objectives, for the financial objectives, to the operational capabilities. And so it'll be seen as a very strategic process when you have executive sponsorship.
Okay.
Second, overcoming roadblocks. Now, yourself, your viewers, I know that you've experienced when you implement S&OP, you're going to bump up against a whole bunch of different things. Some are process related, some are cultural related, some are, organizational silos. That's a familiar one. Or competing priorities, or even resistant to change, right? That's a big one, right? And
That
so
is a big one.
having executive sponsorship will help you blow through those barriers, will help enable a more unified S&OP process, build consensus, get everyone on board. Right? And I'll throw in a 2B there as well. That's the change management that a lot of people talk about, because S&OP is a process, but it's also a behavioral change too, right? And so having that executive presence, that executive sponsorship will help drive that new way of working through the business. And the last one I would say is organizational commitment. I'm trying to take about 7 or 10 and narrow them down. It's the creating the culture of accountability, right? And so if you have the executive sponsorship too, they are trickling down through the organization, the taking accountability for your actions and your responsibilities, right? And so that's why you always want to have that executive leadership in the S&OP process somehow, some way.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. So if I synthesize that into something simple, even I can understand, it sounded like it elevates it, it makes you help get things done, and it holds you accountable. Those were your top 3 things that you pretty much said an executive sponsor will help with an S&OP process. Does that sound about right?
I love it. That's perfect. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned you had that list of 7. Was there a 4 or 5 that's important that we are missing? I mean, because if they're on there, hey, let's share them.
Yeah, that's that 5-course dinner that I was talking about.
I'm always about 5-course dinners. I mean, so I can do that sometimes.
I like food as well. So, I think I'm a big component too of the fundamentals of sales and operation planning. But I also feel that an executive sponsor helps with the cross-pollination and the functional alignment, because you're going to have functional leaders that are going to sit in the S&OP process. So the other one is have the executive sponsorship help with that, what I call fit for purpose S&OP. And that fit for purpose is when I have my marketing gentleman or woman sitting at my S&OP process, or sometimes we have our quality team in there as well. We want to make sure that our functional leaders are aligned and is relevant topic for them as well. And the executive sponsor can help with that fit for purpose conversation.
Okay. Well, kind of going back to some the three main ones you had, you mentioned that kind of the breaking down the obstacles, making it work. What are some of the obstacles typically that you need an executive there to break down those obstacles versus things that really manage yourself? What's their role? What does a sponsor do as far as breaking down obstacles?
Yeah, one of the examples or one of the most recent examples that I had was in one of the last organizations that I joined. My day one was Denise implemented sales and operation planning within a very short period of time.
And you have 2 weeks to do it.
Exactly. It was the number one objective. It was already on the executive leadership meeting, and had to move very, very quickly. And as a result, some of the steps were missed, right? I did not have my alignment meeting. I pulled the data that was available to me to make graphs, make charts, make taglines. I tried to figure out what the hot topics were myself, just by understanding from my past experiences what I thought was relevant. And I pulled the deck together. I must have sent the deck out maybe 12 hours before the meeting, which isn't all too untypical. But when I got to the meeting, what I realized is that the organization was using different data. We were not working with real-time data. So basically, everything that I put together in some of the leaders' eyes was just a heap of garbage. It didn't make sense to them. And it was it turned us in the wrong direction, because here we want the big pop and circumstance, right, for the big S&OP reveal, and we are not aligned on the data, right? We are not aligned on the definitions. So note to self, even if the organization wants an S&OP process tomorrow, you have to do your due diligence. But one of the important roles that the executive sponsorship said, we have to take a step back. Denise, what do you need to clean the data? Denise, what do you need to harmonize the data? Denise, what do you need to have a single source of truth, right? So it opened up a much larger situation, which if I did not have the executive sponsorship, I would not be able to move the business forward. It wasn't just the S&OP process that benefited from the data being accurate or have a level of integrity. It was a whole plethora of different parts of the organization that also benefited from it as well.
Okay. So we talk a lot about sponsorship, and you gave some great examples of how they can sponsor, how they can, help break down the barriers, get what you need to make sure it's successful. My question that I get a lot is there a difference between sponsored and an engaged executive? And do you really want both? Is there a need for both in an S&OP process?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. And I would say, yes, there is a difference. And I'll give you an example why there's a difference. We had a situation where our marketing team overpredicted the amount of sales one year, and our supply chain team kicked into action. We got the raw materials, we got what we needed, we got the people, and we started to manufacture to meet the sales projections. And as we're going along 6 months, 8 months into it, we're realizing that we are not reaching our sales projections. So our CFO said, we need to stop. We have a lot of assets in our inventory, and we're still turning the faucet on, getting all these raw materials. So the chief financial officer said, let's stop. But the chief commercial officer, who is an engaged functional leader, said, no way. Keep the faucet on. Keep producing, keep manufacturing. So we had two engaged functional leaders that said yes and no. Who's going to make the decision on what to do? The executive sponsor was the one who spoke with our S&OP team, got all the data, understood the trade-offs, the business imperatives, and that person, the executive sponsor, was the one who went to the engaged alignment functional leaders to say, this is a decision that's going to happen. Okay. So in my experience, there's been a significant difference between the executive sponsorship and engaged leaders. I get asked the question all the time, Eric, who should the executive sponsor be?
Okay, who should the executive sponsor be?
Yeah.
Good question there, huh?
I've been fortunate to work for a lot of companies where there's a very traditional hierarchy, and I could say it's got to be the chief operating officers, or it's got to be the vice president of supply chain, right? But as I move into different areas of my career and I work for different companies, it's not necessarily the title, but it's the characteristics. So I like to bring in the characteristics of what you're looking for in a leader, right? And so you're looking for somebody who has that strong presence at the executive leadership team that can sell the sales and operation approach to bring the value of S&OP. Now, it's a bit unlikely. I've never run into an executive that doesn't understand what S&OP is. But still, if you have that champion that has that deep commitment to the S&OP process and is committed and is passionate, as the S&OP team is, then that's one of the things that you want to look at. Another characteristic is a leader that can build trust, that has the respect of the organization. That's extremely important, because when you run into those situations that I explained before about who's got the D, you need to have that building of trust and respect, right? So I've read a lot too about in many companies when there's a big study by ProSci, for example, of 1,100 people, and they ask that question, well, who is the senior sponsor? Who is that senior person? And it actually says it could be 2 levels below a business head, or it could be 1 level above who's ever leading the sales and operation planning process, right? So it seems to be that there's a range and there's a gauge when you talk about level or a power of the organization, but I always lean on more of the characteristics. So it's a combination of both, in my opinion.
And as long as they can accomplish those first 3 things, as far as elevating it, making sure things can happen, and keeping it accountable, I guess it can be anyone inside your organization.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And I think that as you build out the sales and operation planning process, I'm sure that some of your viewers are in the whole continuum. They're either designing, architect, building an S&OP process from the inception, or you have some others that are in the mature process, and now they're thinking about how can I bring it into the next level of a biannual executive S&OP, IBP, bringing in those finances and bringing in a larger business, broader business people. And so there's always a point where you can reevaluate as you start to grow and mature the S&OP process, but I still think the selection process is the same.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the audience, and FYI, IBF does a lot of research, and about 17% of the audience most likely falls in the emerging type of just starting out in an S&OP process, just getting their legs underneath them. So this question is more for that 17% of the audience, or most likely probably the majority of the audience can benefit from this question. But We talked about the ideal sponsor. You did a great job kind of framing up what does that sponsor look like. We talked about what they do. We've done a good job to this point. The next question then would be, how do we gain and maintain that executive sponsor? How do we get them on board? We know what we need to do. How do we convince them that this is what we need to do and get them part of the process?
Yeah, love that question. And I think at the Chicago conference, I was given an example of walking through a virtual home, right? And would you buy a home without even seeing it, right? So here, I think it's extremely important to build out that roadmap, to build out that business case, to build out that charter, and to work with your executive sponsor to gain that alignment on, well, what does good look like? What are we going to talk about? So what I did when I was building it out is I sat down and wrote out a charter. And the charter was the objective, and the charter was the cadence, and the charter was the members. Now, that doesn't happen in isolation. You're not sitting at your desk going, I think you need to join, and I think you need to join. It's going on that listening tour, talking to people, because now you are the foot soldier of saying, I'm going to implement an S&OP. This is what it's all about. This is what I'm talking about. And you're actually gaining that alignment with those functional stakeholders way in the beginning. And you're learning about what's important to them without them even knowing it. You understand what's important to them. I've seen sometimes KPIs are talked about at the S&OP process, and sometimes they're not, right? And so when you're in the beginning stage, you're building out that roadmap of the who, the what, the cadence, so people understand why you keep tapping into them every single month or every single quarter, and what you want to get out of it. What does good look like? What will you talk about? And that's a one-page charter that you are working in concert with functional leaders and the executive sponsor. And that is the first thing. Build out that business case. And that business case, for example, could be as simple as, I'm going to start with a basic, I'm going to start with a build, and then I'm going to end with a sustain. It can be 3 steps long. It could be 17 steps long, but I like to simplify things too. And I typically see when you're starting off with an S&OP process, you are in a build mode, which means, hey, right now I'm just balancing out demand and supply. Maybe 9 months from now, I'm putting a revenue spin on it. And maybe 18 months from now, I'm bringing in more of an enterprise orientation, right? And so that business case that says not just today, but tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, this is the value that S&OP is going to bring.
Okay, wonderful. So when you're getting that started, then you have your charter, you're getting it up and running, you're getting the right people on the bus. You have your executive as one of those people on the bus as well. They're not driving, but I mean, are you visiting them once a week, kind of giving them updates saying, hey, here's what we are, here's the problems I'm facing? How should you interact with that executive as you're getting it from that immersion to an essential type of S&OP process? When you're just starting out on the journey early on, you mentioned you came on board. How do you interact with that executive early on?
Yeah, there's a lot of definitions. There's a lot of conversation about what good looks like. And it's with the executive sponsor, but I would also say too, it's with your functional leaders as well, right? What are your hot topics? What are those reflection points? What is important to the business? And it can be different depending on the business that you're at. In one S&OP, our new product launches took up the majority of the conversation. In other companies that I've been in, it's all been about raw materials. And the other one that I've been in, it's been about key performance metrics, right? And if we dip down into the yellow, we want to make sure that you're talking to your executive sponsor almost every week about this is what's tracking. So I would say even set that schedule up. To have a alignment meeting or a preliminary meeting what I found has worked very well, as you know, S&OP it's very cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really no time to stop and take a breath and go, "Phew, I'm glad that's over." Because as soon as the executive S&OP is over, you go right back into your portfolio review, demand review, and it's cyclical. I always say it's like going up the gondola and the ski trip and then coming right back down and going back up, right? It's very cyclical. So you want to actually put into that schedule an alignment meeting. And so
Gotcha.
that could be monthly, that could be quarterly, depending on where you are with S&OP. And you talk about, here we are. We agreed that this is what good look like. We're on it or we're not, and this is what we're going to do. Are you aligned with that? Right. And so I
Wonderful.
would say put that into the schedule.
Wonderful. Well, believe it or not, it's actually out of time. I mean, it was wonderful advice you gave. I mean, I knew it would. So hopefully people kind of take it away. So, I mean, I want to thank you for sharing with our audience a little bit of what you shared in Chicago, because I definitely think there was a lot of benefit there for them.
Thank you, Eric. It is so much fun. I love watching your podcast. It's always filled with energy and they're so completely relevant. I am so honored to be part of it. Thanks again for your time today.
Well, I think hopefully we'll see you in Scottsdale. Maybe we'll get that 5-course meal down there.
Absolutely. I can't wait. All right, Eric. Thanks for your time.
Ciao. That was a great conversation, great chat we had with Denise. And I knew it would be. She gave great advice exactly what executive sponsorship looks like and how we might be able to get it as well. Me, though, I'm all about personal responsibility. That has been one of my guiding principles now for some time. Personal responsibility. Yes, top executive support engagement, absolutely, 100%, we need it. But maybe, just maybe, you are to blame if you don't have it. There's other reasons why S&OP stalls or S&OP fails. It might have been on top of the list, but there's other reasons as well. The long aggregation or time horizon, multiple sources of truth, the long KPIs, just having reporting meetings. And for executives, it's just another meeting, especially if the meeting is speaking the wrong language in units, not volume and dollars. It's just reporting. There's nothing matching, so you don't really know what the truth is and whose information to use. You're talking about what's going to happen in the next few weeks with no decisions being made. I mean, think about that type of S&OP process, and you're an executive. Would you want to show up for it? I mean, I'm all about executive engagement, but I'm also about personal responsibility. And we may have to look in the mirror. If you don't have the right elements of an S&OP process together, you're not talking at the right time horizon, you're not making decisions, you're not speaking the right language at higher levels of aggregation, you don't have the right people involved talking the same thing, then I almost guarantee they're not going to continue to be involved. We have to create something they want to be involved with as well. You want them involved, yes, but everything Denise talked about, we have to create something they want to be involved with as well. So look in the mirror at what your S&OP looks like and then ask, why aren't the executives involved? Well, that's a wrap for me. I'm going to go talk to my daughter, and see if I can get the weekend off. My name is Eric. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. I want to thank Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thank you, Arkiva, for the wonderful support, and check them out. Thank our IBF as well for putting these together. And remember, that whole month of September, we have the demand planning, supply planning, S&OP online training, 6 different courses over the entire month. Choose one to go to or get a discount and go to all of them. Wonderful opportunity, completely virtual. It's cost effective, great topics, so check it out at ibf.org. Finally, remember, before you talk to your boss, don't forget, wash your hands. Just whenever you're ready. So you're ready. So that's Scott behind the scenes. He does all the magic. I just come and have to talk and have conversation. I got the easy job. He's got the hard one.
I'm ready to rock and roll.